We've talked a lot about Antonio Gramsci on this and how Gramsci talked about the march through the institutions. Gramsci came to the conclusion that the reason why communism wasn't picking up in places like the US or the UK or France or wherever it was is because there were sufficient cultural institutions to protect the values that we had in this country. And one of the values that we had was you have a right to your own labor, and you have a right to earn and acquire property, and you have a right to build a business, and you have a right to do all of these things, right? That it's not going to be guaranteed for you. It's not going to be given to you, but we're going to prevent the government from either stealing from you, or we're going to prevent the government from preventing you from going out and pursuing happiness. And what's happening right now is that the leftist version of that is, no, the government needs to be controlling everything. That's what socialists believe. Socialists believe that the government should be controlling all the means of production. And some people will say, no, it's communism, Nick. No, it's socialism. Communists actually believe that the end state is a classless, stateless society where everything's just kind of owned in common and everyone's fine with that. And you don't actually need a government arm to keep it in place because there's so much prosperity and happiness that why would you want anything else? That's when communists say real communism has never been tried. They're correct because it's a fairy tale. It's like saying, well, riding real unicorns has never been tried. Yeah, because unicorns don't exist. Right? It's not something that's ever going to happen. But what socialism was advertised of by people like Lenin is, well, socialism is this intermediary step between whatever the system that they're currently taking over is and communism. Socialism is when the government comes in and runs all the means of production, right? They do that on behalf of the people, right? Because the people aren't ready yet for the dictatorship of the proletariat. So now the government has to come in. So I would say socialists are worse than communists. Socialists are basically communists who gave up on the end state. They don't think you're ever going to reach a point where you can have a classless, stateless society and everyone just lives in harmony. And so they want to be the ones controlling what the government controls, which is fundamentally everything, right? So that's who these guys are. And that's who's driving a lot of this, because you see it in the rhetoric. You see it in the rhetoric. They will, every once in a while, they will give some sort of like hat tip or some sort of nod to the Constitution or the founding fathers. But let me ask you this question. The same people right now that are invoking 250th anniversary of America, we don't have any kings, we fought a revolution over this, we have a constitution, the founding fathers would be rolling over the grave. The same people saying that right now at a No Kings protest. Were any of them saying that when blue governors in blue states were completely shutting down your rights to be able to work, your rights to be able to worship, your rights to be able to go out and congregate? Were they complaining about any of that? Were they invoking the Constitution? No, of course not. Of course not. Right? Do you think if they got power again, that the Constitution, like if we got out, let's say the Democrats got in charge and Gavin Newsom is president and they got control of the Senate, they got control of the House, they stacked the Supreme Court, and we say, whoa, wait a second, guys, the founding fathers would be rolling over the graves. Wait a second, guys, the Constitution is supposed to limit this. Do you think they'd be like, oh man, that's a good point, I guess I should be intellectually consistent? No, of course they wouldn't. No, what they would do is they would look at you and say, we're trying to achieve social justice. The Constitution, that's an antiquated document. The founders, they were a bunch of rich, white, straight slave owners that didn't want to pay their taxes. What do we care? And how do we know they would say that about the Constitution? How do we know they would say this about the founders? Because they do. Because they have. Because we see kids and we see college students regurgitating these statements. And I don't think anybody has any confusion about which party those college students or those students are voting for. That's what they believe. They're not using these terms because they love the Constitution. They're not invoking the founders because they respect the founders. They're invoking these terms because we love and respect the Constitution and the founders. That's why. And as soon as they get power, we know what to expect. We can expect what we're seeing in Virginia right now. In Virginia right now, the moment they got, but nobody wants to take your guns. Oh, except for the Democrats that took power and now want to take your guns. Nobody wants to gerrymander. Oh, except for the Democrats that took power and now they want to gerrymander. Nobody wants to raise taxes on everybody. Oh, except for the Democrats who took power and now raising taxes on everybody. Nobody wants to indoctrinate your kids in schools. Oh, except for the Democrats that took power and now they're indoctrinating your kids in your schools. Every single time. We either start believing them when they tell us who they are. And likewise, we stop believing them when all of a sudden they use references that we appreciate. Because they're not doing that because they've come around to our way of thinking, right? When we say, oh gosh, what if the shoe was on the other foot? They don't care. They don't care. This is a useful tactic for them, and so they will continue to use it. And what it's going to take is for people on the right to recognize it for what it is and say, okay, look, they're not invoking the founders because they care. They're not invoking the Constitution because they care. We know that if they're in power, they don't care about those things, limiting their power. So if we know that, when they invoke it on us, we need to stop taking them at their word. We need to stop assuming that maybe they've come around to our way of thinking on some of these things and recognize the dangers of centralized power. They don't. They love it. They want it. So why does it still move us? Why do we still feel compelled on some level to pay homage to this as if, oh, well, I really need to consider what they're saying? I mean, look, I'm a big believer that truth is truth. And so if somebody actually wants to present a good argument, I don't mean try to appeal to my emotions. I don't mean try to, convince me that they actually hold sacred the same things I hold sacred. But if they want to make a good argument for a particular thing, Trump did this, I think that was a violation of the Constitution. Well, now we have something objective that we can analyze. But that's not what they do. You can see it by all these man on the street interviews. They speak in hyperbolic language. They call everyone a fascist. They thought Charlie Kirk was a fascist. So, ladies and gentlemen, please stop taking him seriously.